Hey everyone, Brandflakes here, back with another Eternal Return video. Today we'll be talking about augments and how they determine your playstyle. It's pretty important to know what these do, and so there's a lot of augments, so I'll be going very quickly over them. If you have more questions, just let me know and I can make a more detailed video, but since I'm trying to get more videos out and covering topics very succinctly, I'm trying to rush through these. But please, if you want to know more about augments, I can do a much longer video about each augment type, the three of them, red, blue, and green. And yeah, if you need to know that information, then I'm more than happy to provide that, but knowing the interest would be helpful. So let's get right into it because there's a lot of these to go through. The first augment tree we'll be talking about is the red tree. So for your main augments on the red tree, you're gonna have Frailty, Frenzy, Vampiric Bloodline, Red Sprite, and Adrenaline. So by far the best, most generic augment here is going to be Vampiric Bloodline. This augment gives you a lot of free Omnivamp, which is the main form to sustain in this game, as well as a free burst of AP or skill amp once you max it out. It is important to note that the bonus AP and the bonus skill amp are actually flat values, which means that they're not affected by multiplicative increases like what you get from your skill amp, weapon mastery, or persona / holy orders. So this could change at any moment. I might be wrong honestly about it, but when I tested it, I noticed that the amount I was getting from Vampiric Bloodline was always very flat. So just keep that in mind if you're wondering why your damage isn't as good late game. Early game it'll be extremely good, but obviously as the game goes on, if you're playing a mage, you'll have more sources of this percentage increases, and it might be a bit more annoying or a bit more aggravating for the fact that you don't see it adding as much as you think it would. So moving on, we'll be talking about Adrenaline, which is probably the best augment for auto attackers by a pretty good margin. It really gives you a lot of basic attack amp, which is pretty hard to come by these days because no one has really nerfed it on most characters. So if you're playing characters like Air Isol or maybe like Felix, characters like to auto a lot, and you want to do a lot of damage, it's gonna be a pretty good choice. Maybe not top tier, but pretty good if you want to feel good about auto attacking. Next, we'll be talking about Frailty. Frailty is kind of your classic burst augment, but you should keep in mind that Frailty requires 3 separate instances of damage. So if you're using something like Adriana Q, you can't just hit Q and proc Frailty. You have to hit an auto and then a Q, and then I think either her passive or another auto. And it might actually be another auto just because Adriana specifically is coded very oddly. You should really go into practice tool and check what your interactions are with your multi-hits or passes, because sometimes you might get a very rude awakening like with Adriana where you might expect it to work one way, but it doesn't. Also, I think Frailty's value is pretty poor in this current meta purely because a lot of characters that are very good kind of had front-loaded damage, for example like Adina, where the fact that the defense shred on Frailty happening in the latter 4 hits might matter a lot. Because for example, someone like Dailin, who likes to Q auto Q, she gets a lot of damage in the later half of the fight where she has her ultimate and more auto attacks coming through, but someone like Adina might really want that damage to come out in front because she might hit Sun at the very beginning, and then once your Sun is out, your damage is a lot lower. So what's the point of having Frailty when you hit Sun into like random spells that are filler, and then you're like, oh, Frailty's off because it has a very short debuff duration and my cooldowns are still coming up. So it's, again, very important to know what exactly you're working with when you're taking Frailty. Frenzy is kind of a augment that's very niche. I think right now it's only usable on very specifically AR characters because of how Overheat works. Overheat being the AR weapon skill, which gives them more damage when they hit it and refills their ammo. That combined with Frenzy is a pretty natural pairing, and it's pretty much the only weapon skill that I would say you should take it on. Moving on to the sub-augments for the red tree, the best one you should take on every character is going to be Stopping Power. It's just free damage. Dismantle Goliath you take on every ranged character, and probably not on melee characters just because of the fact that a lot of melee characters will have more HP than ranged characters, so you're missing out on a lot of value while you're hitting those squishier targets. Augments to consider would be Spirit Culling, Quench, and Anima Reaper. Spirit Culling and Quench are a lot better in general, I believe. Quench is very good for farming animals if you're melee. Spirit Culling is very good if you're playing very SP hungry characters like Hedgen, Celine, and I think Shoichi. Anima Reaper is something that I personally don't like, but I know a few players like. I think the issue with it is it's very slow, and the only characters that really want it would be crit characters. Crit characters really enjoy the flat AP because they're the only characters that can really scale off of that multiplicatively. So you want to be careful about taking Anima Reaper. I think on casters is not as good because you get a lot of AP from other sources since you're stacking AP. So if you're at like 200 AP, 10 AP in the last 15 minutes isn't going to matter. You'd rather just have, you know, Spirit Culling to make your game easier or Quench to make your farming much easier throughout the game. And then Vengeance, just don't take ever. Final Zone, I'm sure people can count on one hand at this point in the season how many times they've made it there, so just do not bother with that one. Moving on into the blue augments, which are the defensive augments. These main augments will be Diamond Shard, Ironclad, Oblivion Can Wait, Heavy Kneepads, and Bitter Retribution. The only real good one here, I would say in general, is going to be Ironclad. Ironclad is going to be very usable on a lot of characters because most weapon skills in this game have very quick activation times. The sole exceptions would be stuff like Two-Hand Sword and Tonfa, where it's already very defensive. So if you have a defensive weapon skill, I would say Ironclad isn't very good, but if it's something like Glove, something like Nunchuck, something like Dagger, it might not be that bad because you can use it in the middle of a fight and get a lot of value from it. Moving on from that, Diamond Shard's another augment that used to be very good but has been nerfed a lot. It's another very conditional augment because you need to be a character like Yuki or Yan that can really proc it easily, just because if you can't CC, then you can't activate it. So characters like Dylan, who would probably enjoy using it, can't really use it because her main form of CC is her ultimate, which is very annoying. Characters like Daniel might enjoy it to play dive style, but unfortunately, since his only source of hard crowd control is his root, that's very niche, he can't really use it either. So keep in mind that when you take Diamond Shard, you need to be a character with good crowd control accessibility and very spammable crowd control accessibility. I would say that Oblivion Can Wait and Heavy Kneepads are very garbage. Don't ever touch them. Oblivion Can Wait used to be okay for a very brief time period when Augments first released and has never seen the light of day ever since. And Heavy Kneepads is kind of odd because you have to lose HP to use it, and by the time you lose HP as a melee, you're probably going to die anyways. Bitter Retribution is pretty good, but I would say it's niche just because you're not really going to be using that HP very often. I would say that you want to be using Ironclad, or you just don't want to be touching this tree at all, or if you're Yuki, you can use Diamond Shard too, but those characters are in a pretty weird state, so just be careful with what you choose. So the blue tree's sub-augments will be Embolden, Cavalcade, Steadfast, Dull Blades, Reinforced Armor, and Diamond Dash. Embolden is very good if you're playing characters with very accessible heals, so stuff like Eleven, Adina, or someone with spammable shield like Ekion. We can activate the defense on command. It's always going to be very valuable because it adds even more tankiness to your shield, which is very important because the more effective value you have for something temporary like a shield or maybe just healing in general, obviously the more value you're getting from it. So very powerful if your character can use it. Unfortunately, if your character can't use it at all, like someone like Daniel, you can't bother doing it. Cavalcade is very strong just because of the nature of squads. It gives you a lot of free damage reduction that stacks very quickly, especially in the middle of a team fight. Steadfast is pretty good because you can get crowd control very quickly, which is again a free anti-burst tool that you can slap on for free. It is a bit more niche because some characters don't ever crowd control you. So, for example, someone like Air Aya is only ulting, but by the time she's ulting, she's probably running away. So Steadfast isn't as good, but obviously against stuff like Hyunwoo or Dylan, Hejin, it's gonna be better because you get that bonus damage reduction very quickly. But it's a little niche, but it's generally good because a lot of characters in this game have crowd control. Dull Blades is pretty good against crit characters. I think crit characters aren't super meta. There are a few like Heart and Rio. Rio doesn't crit, so basically just Heart. And a few melees are also going to be using it, but for the most part, I would say you should check your lobby before you end up hitting it. That can be done by hitting F in your character select screen, so if you see something good in there that you want to take Dull Blades for, then go ahead and take it. Reinforced Armor could be pretty good if Nimble Neuron ends up changing items. Right now it's pretty mid because you have to play very specific items to get value, and it only really starts getting very good value once you have legendary items, which runs into the same issue as Anima Reaper. You have to have items and play the game. Might as well take a active augment the entire game as opposed to that. Dine and Dash, you know, for newbies probably not bad, but the stats are so small that you're not going to notice it, so just learn how to eat food. So for the utility tree, which is the green tree, we have Healing Factor, Healing Drone, Amp Drone, Run It Back, and Sentinel. Healing Factor is going to be very good for characters who have inbuilt sustain, kind of like what Embolden was, except on an 8 main augment. Gives you a lot of extra bonus sustain, so you should take it on any character that has sustain. Healing Drone gives you free sustain on characters that might not have it, or free burst of healing if you need it. The burst meta is very strong, so your character needs to be naturally tanky in order to really use the value, because you need to be able to survive the entire tick. And if the opponent has Healing Cut, the effectiveness is considerably lower, but still very useful for tankier team comps. Amp Drone is kind of weird because it requires a very specific condition. A lot of characters in this game kind of use your ultimate freely to farm animals, which makes Amp Drone more niche on a lot of characters, but it's still pretty good. It doesn't have the same issue as Vampiric Bloodline, where it is genuinely a multiplicative value, but Vampiric Bloodline is more relevant for more of the game, and Amp Drone requires you to play very specifically. So I would say for characters like Adri specifically, Amp Drone's not bad, but you have to know what you're playing to actually get value out of it. Run it back, don't bother. I think maybe if people farm a lot it might be good, but for now it's pretty bad. Sentinel might be okay on characters like spamming, like I would say Elena, but otherwise probably better value in other augments that give you sustain. Vampiric Bloodline is probably better overall, but maybe Sentinel, if you're playing a heavy dive comp, will provide you value. The sub-augments for the green tree are going to be Thorn Shackles, Assembly, Logistics, Thea, Urban Warfare, Head Starter, and Penny Pincher. The two really good ones that you should only take for the most part are going to be Thorn Shackles and Penny Pincher. Thorn Shackle gives you a lot of damage for free if you have good consistent crowd control, and Penny Pincher is useful if you need to afford things a bit sooner. Assembly used to be pretty good, but they've nerfed it since. If you're being dove in your backliner, it's probably not bad, but if you have the option, I would go Penny Pincher, Thorn Shackles. Otherwise, Assembly is probably your decent one to take. Logistics, don't take. It's really useless because you can make food very easily. Thea is pretty good because vision is really important, but I would say at the point in the game where you're going to really care about Thea, you're going to have a bunch of cameras to spam, so just try and use your cameras, I guess. But if you're just wanting that more consistent safety, Thea is never bad to take. Urban Warfare, who uses traps, and Head Starter is probably good on very niche builds, but you have to have those builds to really get value out of it. So yeah, that'll be all for this video, a bit on more rambly side, and again, if you guys want to see a more thorough explanation for all of these, please let me know and I'll try and get to it. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time. Have a good day or night wherever you are. Bye bye.